What if I told you that right now, without a warrant, without your knowledge, your private conversations, your financial transactions, even the places you visit, could all be monitored? Not because you're guilty, not because someone reported you, but because a system built after one of America's darkest days gave the government that power, just in case. Welcome to the post-9/11 reality shaped by the USA Patriot Act. In the wake of the September 11 attacks, fear gripped the United States like never before. Nearly 3,000 lives lost in a matter of hours. Smoke rose from shattered buildings, and across the country, a collective trauma set in. But while grief dominated the headlines, something else was brewing behind closed doors, a sweeping transformation of how the U.S. government would define and pursue security. A law was born, not with cautious deliberation, but with urgency, fear, and near-unanimous support. That law was the Patriot Act. In this video, we're diving deep. We'll revisit that fateful day. Then we'll walk through how a 342-page bill flew through Congress in just 6 weeks, drastically expanding surveillance powers. We'll unpack what the law actually says, how it was used, how it was abused, and how it reshaped American life. We'll spotlight the voices who cheered it and those who warned against it. We'll examine how the Patriot Act influenced laws in other nations, changed the way we view privacy, and created a digital landscape where safety and freedom are constantly at odds. And in the end, you'll face the same dilemma our leaders faced. How much freedom are you willing to give up to feel safe? Let's explore the facts, the fallout, and the future of one of the most controversial laws in modern American history. September 11, 2001. 4 hijacked planes, nearly 3,000 dead, and an entire nation left wondering, how did this happen? In the aftermath, it wasn't just buildings that collapsed. Trust in the government's ability to protect crumbled too. Agencies that were supposed to communicate didn't. Warnings that should have raised red flags were ignored. The attacks weren't just horrifying, they revealed the glaring cracks in America's national security infrastructure. Congress called it a failure of imagination. But for millions of Americans, it felt like a failure, period. Almost overnight, political divisions blurred. Democrats and Republicans spoke in one voice, never again. The demand was clear, stop the next attack at all costs, and that urgency led to something unprecedented. Just 45 days after 9/11, the Patriot Act was signed into law. Think about that. Over 300 pages of sweeping legislation with major constitutional implications debated and passed in 6 weeks. Many lawmakers later admitted they didn't even read the entire bill before voting. But at the time, the vote was seen as a patriotic duty. In the Senate, only one senator, Russ Feingold, stood against it. In the House, it passed 357 to 66. Few dared to question it. President George W. Bush signed it on October 26, 2001, stating, "We're taking new measures to detect and prevent terrorism before it strikes." But behind the scenes, some legal scholars and civil liberty groups were sounding the alarm. This law, they warned, opens the door to mass surveillance and closes the door on accountability. The Patriot Act has 10 titles, each covering different areas of counterterrorism and surveillance. But 3 areas made headlines: and history, expanded surveillance powers, detention and deportation, and financial tracking and info sharing. Agencies could now use roving wiretaps, meaning one warrant could cover all devices a suspect used, not just one phone. They could issue national security letters, NSLs, subpoenas for personal data without needing court approval. Sneak and peek, warrants allowed agents to search homes or offices without informing the subject until after the fact. The law gave federal agencies the power to detain non-citizens suspected of terrorism, sometimes without formal charges, for extended periods. It pushed banks to report suspicious transactions. Agencies could now freely share information with each other, a reaction to 9/11 failures where intelligence agencies didn't collaborate. While these powers aimed to stop terrorism, critics argued they were too vague, too broad, and ripe for abuse. In short, the government had become both watchman and judge. The shift was immediate and massive. Phone companies began turning over call metadata. Tech giants complied with secret surveillance requests. The NSA launched programs like PRISM, X-Keyscore, and Boundless Informant to collect emails, browser histories, cloud files, and even live chats. Most Americans didn't know it was happening until 2013. That's when a former NSA contractor named Edward Snowden blew the whistle. He leaked thousands of classified documents showing just how far government surveillance had gone. According to Snowden, the government wasn't just watching suspects, it was watching everyone. The response? Mixed. Some called Snowden a hero, others a traitor. But the public conversation had shifted for good. Supporters said, the Patriot Act helped stop terror plots in New York, Los Angeles, and Washington. It gave law enforcement the tools needed to keep up with 21st century threats. Critics fired back. The act violated the Fourth Amendment. It created a surveillance state where ordinary citizens were constantly monitored. It led to racial profiling and unjust detentions, especially for Muslim, Arab, and South Asian communities. The conversation deepened after Snowden's revelations. The question wasn't just, is this legal? It became, is this who we are? Domestically, the act reshaped privacy expectations. Tech companies introduced end-to-end encryption, not just as a feature, but as a form of resistance. WhatsApp, Signal, Proton Mail all grew in popularity as digital privacy became a cultural conversation. Globally, the ripple effects were mixed. Some countries, like the UK and Australia, modeled new laws after the Patriot Act. Others criticized the US for undermining global privacy norms. International trust in American tech companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, took a major hit. The line between protection and intrusion blurred, and it's stayed that way ever since. It didn't take long for civil rights groups to act. The ACLU, EFF, and others filed lawsuits challenging sections of the law, especially those involving warrantless surveillance and indefinite detention. In 2015, Congress responded with the USA Freedom Act. It ended bulk data collection by the NSA, introduced more transparency into the FISA court, required agencies to use more targeted data requests. But critics argued the changes were superficial. Many core provisions of the Patriot Act remained, and in 2020, they were reauthorized again. Since 2001, America has changed. Young people today grew up in a world where surveillance is normal. Airport screenings, data tracking, and background checks are routine. The idea of privacy feels outdated to some and essential to others. Meanwhile, the tech world has become a silent battlefield between governments and privacy advocates. Apple's refusal to unlock iPhones for the FBI, Facebook's data scandals, the rise of digital self-defense tools. The Patriot Act lit the match. We're still living in the fire. So here's the question. Should the Patriot Act stay as it is, be reformed, or repealed entirely? Proponents argue terrorism is still a real threat. The rise of cyber warfare, AI-driven radicalization, and state-sponsored hacking all demand vigilance. Opponents say the law was built in panic, not principle. They believe it's outlived its purpose and now undermines democracy more than it protects it. The truth? It's complicated, and that's exactly why we're talking about it. The Patriot Act wasn't just a law, it was a turning point. It changed how America sees itself, how it treats its citizens, and how far it's willing to go to stop the next tragedy. It gave the government tools to prevent harm and opened doors to potential abuse. And now, over 20 years later, it's still here, still active, still controversial. So we end with this. Would you trade privacy for peace of mind? Would you sacrifice liberty to feel safe? Or is that the beginning of something we'll regret for generations? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the laws shaping your life.